Hi, good morning.
Okay.
Let's get started. So, the topic for today's webinar is your 20s and 30s decide your financial freedom. So, this webinar is mainly for the audience from the Gen Z category, who have just started their career in working and who have just started their personal finance journey. So this will be useful to them on how to build better wealth so that your 40s and 50s can be quite comfortable for you in terms of financial aspects. So we'll just get started. So before starting, I'll just want to highlight a few data points and numbers on how overall investment management uh, actually is at the moment. So as of now, out of 140 crore population in India, around 8.1 crores SIP accounts have been there as of March 2025, and this is up from 6.38 crores, which was uh, as of FY 2024, and as of FY 2025 alone, around 2.9 lakh crores of SIP amount inflows have come in, and almost every month around 20 to 30,000 crores of SIP amount comes into the mutual fund industry as inflows. And the overall SIP AUM has crossed 13.35 lakh crores as of the end of FY 2025. And our mutual fund AUM to GDP ratio is quite low, which is around 19.9%. All the most developed countries have a uh, high percentage of mutual fund AUM to GDP ratio, which indicates that there's a good amount of growth which is supposed to be happening in Indian markets, because Indian citizens and Indian markets, uh, like our population haven't penetrated our Indian markets in to their full potential compared to US or UK. uh, our our penetration to financial markets have been very low because most of our population sticks to traditional finances investments. And another alarming data point is that 75% of our Indians have no emergency fund, and almost 29% of people in our country say that salary doesn't even last more than 15 days, and almost 65% of our working class population haven't saved enough for their retirement. And almost another interesting point is that almost 76.5 lakhs investors, millennial investors, joined mutual funds in the last 5 years. And almost two-thirds of the people who are entering new are uh, beginning with mutual funds, which is a good thing, because when you're starting with a mutual fund, you don't need to worry about managing your investments, as those things are done by a professional fund manager who will be taking care of the investment part. You just need to save and invest in the right fund. So I just want to give an info on why starting early matters. I mean, the topic for today's webinar is that your 20s and 30s decide your financial journey, right? So this is one of the most important slides in this webinar. It's this webinar just says about the topic alone, because let's look at an example. So two investors who are starting with the same SAP amount. One of the investors starts at 25 and another starts at 35. There's a 10-year difference. I mean, one person have immediately started their investments right after they started their job, but the other person wanted to enjoy life. So they might be in the mindset that, I'll just live my life completely in my early days. I'll just save later once I make it big in my career. Maybe this might be the other person two's thought. If you have the same thought, maybe this slide would be very important for you on what you'll be missing out actually. So, like I say, one starts at 25 and they start with an SIP of 5,000, and they've been doing that investment for almost 35 years. Right. So, you know, after 35 years, if they have compounded at 12% rate of return, they would have almost achieved 3.25 crores by the age of 60. And on the second person who started at 35 starts with the same 5,000, they would have almost only got around 95 lakhs for 25 years. So this is why starting early matters actually, right? Because uh, the power of compounding will actually start happening in the longer time frame. The longer you invest, the longer you will make actually. And the same example is like given as an illustration through a graph, right? If you can see here, right, the person who starts at 25 almost till the age of 45, right? If you see the yellow curve, right? Almost till the age of 45, they haven't made any big numbers. Their wealth is almost around just 50 lakhs. They have not even reached 1 crore actually. Like for 20 years, the portfolio is just 50 lakhs, right? But in the next 15 years, see what is happening. I mean, the curve goes very steep, right? So in the last 10 years has done the most of the heavy lifting for his portfolio, right? Whereas if you see for the second person, the same thing is happening actually. Till they're almost they've started at 35, till they're almost 55 or 50, the curve hasn't moved anywhere, right? So you just the last 10 or 15 years is where the actual power of compounding is actually happening, right? So you need to give some good amount of time for you to see the magic of compounding which is happening in your portfolio. So in this case, let's say for example, the person who started 10 years earlier, right, he can comfortably retire at 60, but whereas the person who started his investments at 35 can't do the same. He has to actually wait for another 5 or 10 years to see his compounding work in a much better way, right? So that is why starting early actually matters, even if it's very very small. So another important thing is that like a lot of us, even though if we are investing, right, they don't invest to their full potential. So that is one of the main important aspect. That is lifestyle creep. Which means that you would have started your SIP at 5,000. Maybe you would have you would have started your career and you would have started your salary as 30,000 per month or 35,000 per month. Maybe for 30 to 35,000 a month, 5,000 or 6,000 SIP is a good amount, right? But once you start progressing in your career, let's say your 30,000 salary becomes 45,000 or 50,000, you actually need to increase your investments based on your growth as well, right? If you're not increasing your investments, and if you're actually uh, spending those incremental income that you're getting, it means that you're not saving, or if you're not investing to your full potential. So as you grow, you also need to increase your investments, and you need to also cut down your expenses which are unnecessary, or which are very out of your range. And another important thing, like I was mentioning, like the person who says, I'll just want to enjoy my early days, like they'll be in a mindset to start after a few years, or next year I'll start, or once I'll start my investment once my increment comes. Maybe it means that you're missing out your early years of investments, which will actually do the power of compounding in your later stage of your career, right? So starting early is one of the main important things which will set your 40s and 50s to be very very comfortable. Another most important aspect is emergency fund. Emergency fund is the base, right? When you take personal finance as a topic, there are three most important things which is the main part actually. The first thing is actually emergency fund, because emergency fund is your base. Leave your investments or your insurance. The first one is emergency fund, because let's say you straight away start with your investments, you save to your fullest potential, and you're investing everything into your long term investment bucket, then what will happen? Let's say, for example, after a few months or few years, you're having an emergency which you didn't expect, right? At that point, you won't be having any savings or any funds to meet out that emergency, right? So obviously, you need to actually withdraw from your investment buckets, which is for your long-term investments. So at that time, if you break and if you withdraw some amount, it will actually, disturb your power of compounding, right? So actually, it's better to, channelize your cash flows into three parts. One would be your emergency fund, which is, to build your base, which will actually cover for your short-term needs or emergency needs. So one bucket of your savings should go to emergency fund. So emergency fund can be, uh, it the number will depend on each and every person's requirement. Let's say one person might need only 2 lakhs of emergency fund, another person might need 10 lakhs. It depends on their needs, their income, and their commitment, right? So generally, it can be 6 to 12 months of your monthly expenses. That would be a good number. So I'm trying to say is you just need to focus a portion of your invest savings to your emergency fund in the initial years at least. And another thing is most of the people might be good savers, but they won't be ready to take any risk. They'll be completely sticking into RDs or FDs or very safe investments, which will be very safe to your capital, but it won't grow your capital. Ultimately, savings is the first most important part. The second most important part is to save it and invest so that it compounds in a better growth rate, because sticking completely into your uh, most traditional investments like FDs will actually be safer for a capital, but inflation will be silently eating your capital, right? Because the inflation rate is 6% and your FD rates are 7%, and net of taxes it will be just 6.25%. So the real return is almost like 0.25 or 0.5%, which is very, very low. But when you take better investment asset classes like equity or mutual funds, if you just give some time for 5 to 7 years, it will definitely compound at somewhere between 12 to 15%, right? So obviously, the return that is after adjusting an inflation itself, you're up by 6 or 7%, right? So definitely, like investing in FDs is good for your short-term goals, or it is it can be one of your investment asset class, but not entirely. So asset allocation is completely necessary. You just need to, like diversify your investments into different asset classes, but you can't stick to one asset classes alone. And another thing is, like I was mentioning, the three pillars, right, in your financial journey, in your personal finance. One is emergency fund, another one is insurance, and the third one is investments. The first two are actually the base, because emergency fund and insurance will actually, decide your present needs, right? To protect your present, you actually need emergency fund and insurance. To protect your future, you need investments, right? Because investments are done for the long term, for 20 years or uh, for a longer period of time for your retirement, right? So that is to protect your future. But to protect your present self, emergency fund and insurance. In insurance, you don't need to take a lot of insurance. Only two insurance are necessary, completely necessary. And one is the term insurance, and another one is health insurance, right? So even though if you have a corporate cover, it's always better to take a personal health insurance for you, because once if you're in a career transition phase, or if your next company doesn't give the same health insurance cover, then having a personal health cover would be better, and taking it as earlier in your career will actually be more beneficial, because in terms of both term and health insurance, because the more early you start, your term insurance premium will be quite less, and it will be even more less for women. And another thing is, when you're young, you won't be having a lot of diseases, right, in your 20s. So after, let's say, after 35 or 40, most of us might get any disease at that time. If you have any existing disease, you need to disclose it. So at that time, maybe your sorry, your health insurance premium might increase, right? So it's better to start early and take it earlier in your career. So once in your 20s, it will be tough. So you need to save. and you need to channelize your savings to emergency funds, to insurance, and the balance amount to investments. It's even completely fine in the first 2 years if you don't have enough amount to save for your future. You just need to focus on your present self, and you need to focus mainly on emergency fund, building emergency funds, and taking good insurance policies. Because apart from term insurance and health insurance, all the insurance which are being sold in the markets are completely, not necessary or not needed uh, for your needs, and it's completely done for the other insurance sellers' commissions. All the ULIP plans, the money back policies and endowment policies. Even if you just calculate the XARR, they won't even beat FD interest returns. So in terms of insurance, sticking to term and health is completely fine. All the insurance are not necessary. Other insurance are not necessary. And like I was saying, high income isn't wealth; it's an opportunity. So in this era, I mean, getting a good income is completely great. It's completely fine, but you need to make use of the time when you're getting good income, and you need to use that income to create a better corpus for you, which will help you in the long term, right? So most people think that they need a good take home salary so that they can spend more, they might look successful, and they might do a lot of expenses which will actually which will give enough clout for them in their personal circle, right? But maybe for a short period of time, or until you're employed, that will be completely great, that will look very successful. But once if you're spending all your money to fund your lifestyle, after you're retired, or after that job is gone, maybe you won't be able to lead the same lifestyle, right? So actually what you need to do is, if you're getting good income, you need to make sure that a good amount of percentage of your income gets saved, and gets invested in the right investment asset class, which will compound at a good investment rate. So so in terms of instead of a good spender, you need to actually be a wealth builder actually, so that your overall net worth actually grows. Because if you're like, maybe if you're spending most of your income, maybe you'll be a good citizen to help grow India, but you won't you know be able to grow. And more than half of the people who have built good wealth, good corpus, wouldn't have been in a good income actually. Their discipline would have what helped them to build that big investment corpus, right? So your savings rate actually matters more than your salary size. So this low, so that you become independent in your later stage of your life. Like we saw, starting earlier in your 20s will actually be comfortable for you in your 40s and 50s, right? And if you're getting good income, right, you can actually start planning around goals, right? So for each and every goal, you can create a proper financial plan, and maybe you can channelize your savings to each and every goal, so that all these goals are met at the correct point of time in the later stage of your life. So these are the four pillars of financial freedom. The first one is to protect. Like I was saying, you need to protect your present self. So to protect your present self, you just need your emergency fund and your term and health insurance before anything else. And this anything else means before investments. So first, you actually need to save for that, right? So after once these term insurance and health insurance and emergency funds are built, you can start an SIP, you can automate your savings, and you can select dates for an SIP. You can make sure that if you feel like you're spending money, and if like your investments, your SIP shouldn't be like you will invest what is left after your expenses or commitments are met. You need to make sure that a percentage goes to SIP, and you need to make sure you need to you need to be in a way, in such a way that your after your SIP amount, the balance amount is how you manage your other expenses. It needs to be in such a way like that, right? So that with this amount you invest, and you invest in a current investment asset class so that it grows for your long term investment journey. And you need to also make sure that your investments are correctly managed by a good financial advisor, or you need to actually spend some good amount of time by yourself if you want to manage your own investments. Because we can't just select a fund which will always beat the markets, right? Because no fund manager has beaten the market in a very very consistent manner, right? So you need to actually rebalance your portfolio as and when uh, it's needed. So, it's always better to stick with a right financial advisor for your financial journey. So, like I was saying, your emergency fund comes first. So, this emergency fund will actually help you when there is a job loss, or when you're in a career transition phase, or when there is an income gap where you get an expenses which is unexpected, right? So, instead of people who withdraw from their financial investments, or people who take loans, if you have an emergency fund, you can completely meet those unexpected needs using these funds. And it will also help you during medical emergencies as well, if you don't have an health insurance. But it's always better to take a health insurance as well. And like I was saying, this will help you keep your investments untouched. And an alarming data is that 75% of us Indians don't have an emergency fund today, right? So where to keep those park these emergency fund is another question which you might get. So keeping it plainly in a savings account, and or keeping it in a liquid fund or a money market fund, or a floating FD is where, or these are the buckets where you can actually keep your emergency fund. And emergency fund shouldn't be invested in equity, because equity is a volatile asset class, right? So, for equity is done for long term. So in the first year or second year, your portfolio might go down by 10% or 20%, right? So in terms of emergency funds, you need to make sure that capital is the most protected, right? So you need to prioritize in such a way that more than returns, your actual safety of capital matters. And another thing is that like, you can take a debt, but it needs to be in such a way that you're taking the debt to grow the asset actually. So it should be a productive debt, good debt, right? So debt loans can be taken for home loans, because ultimately, your home or the land will be appreciating. It's an appreciating asset, right? Or it can be an education loan in your early careers, so that you upskill yourself to get better income. Or it can be a low rate loan for your business, right? So these are good debts. But most of our Gen Zs, the people who have started their career, actually do the other way. Most of them have a credit card, and you know which actually involves a very higher interest rate. So credit card is a double-edged sword, right? So definitely, if you can use it in a very wiser way, in a very better organized way, definitely it will help you build your credit score. But you need to make sure that you're properly using it, right? And most of us, like, spend like a lot, and just to be very updated, and just to flex our lifestyle. So most of us who've started their career want to like, buy the latest gadgets around them, or go to the most expensive vacations, or want to do their weddings in a very very grand way. And most of the people who are very very high earners actually do this, right? When you actually want to enjoy your 20s and early 30s, if you start doing these things, for the next 10-15 years, you will actually be paying loans which you would have enjoyed in your early 20s and 30s, which will actually make sure that there is no room for your future investments. And another bad way of getting a loan is buy now pay later kind of EMIs loan, which should not be done. So, like, what are the investment asset classes which will help you in the long term? So these are the investment asset classes. The first one is mutual funds. So you can actually, do SIPs, or you can do lump sum in these mutual funds. And if you stay put for at least 5, 7 years, definitely, you would have compounded in a better way. And out of these all asset classes, mutual funds in last 30, 35 years have given the highest amount of returns. And another thing is your PPF or EPF, right? Which will be uh, going out of your salary. And this is a debt bucket which you don't need to withdraw in partially or in between whenever there is room. It's better to, stay it untouched for your entire career, so that this can be used at a first point of time when you're actually retiring. And another uh, you know uh, better like an advanced version of EPS is actually NPS, right? So NPS has been newly launched. So NPS is also a good way to grow your debt bucket, and NPS actually invests in equity as well, whereas EPF, a very small portion goes to equity component. And real estate is also a good decent asset class, but most of our Indians who are almost in their 40s 50s generally have a lot of exposure to real estate. That is one of the like the one of the mistakes which they do. Like, they have about 70 to 80% of their net worth tied to real estate. Maybe having 30% would be completely fine, right? But most of your net worth should be in a financial asset, so that it's easily accessible. Because when there is an need, like, you can't sell a real estate very easily or very quickly because it's highly illiquid. And gold is also a good asset class. And completely sticking into gold won't do the work, but having a good exposure, about 15 to 20% of your overall net worth, would be a good asset allocation mix. And another thing, and a good way to uh, you know protect your capital is FDs. And FDs can also be about 10% or 5 to 10% in your overall net worth, right? So that you can actually meet these short-term goals with your FDs. So this is another data that shows that like India's SIP AUM has almost hit 13.35 lakh crores in FY 2025, and almost it's up by 24% in the last 1 year alone. So it means that you know uh, like most of the people who are starting their journey, and most of us are getting aware that SAP is actually good in the long run. But the thing is, most of the SAPs are getting stopped in the first year or the second year, right? Because people would have started their journey in at the peak of 2024, because every markets were soaring and everyone was getting to know about it. But most of us who have started at 2024 peak or 2025 starting would have stopped it already, because markets haven't been doing good, right? So SAP is a good tool, provided you need to make sure that you run your SIPs for a very, very longer period of time, for at least you need to just to experience how your investments are. Maybe you can test yourself by investing a little in the first cycle, but once you experience returns, right, you need to make sure that you save to your fullest potential. And a person who's running his SIP for 25, 30 years will actually be comfortably retiring, right? So your discipline actually matters, even though if you're investing in a uh, good asset class which gives you good returns for a long, long period of time. And most of us, and there are some people who actually take a lot of insurance. Their most of their investments would be in insurance, because some people would have told him that your investment is actually insurance, and they would have almost taken a lot of LIC policies. They would have taken ULIP policies. They would have taken endowment plans, money back plans, and a lot of plans, right? So those insurance are actually not needed. The only two insurance which you will be needing in your life is your term insurance and your health insurance. Term insurance should be in such a way that it's actually equal to your human life value. So there are steps to calculate your human life value. If even if you reach out to our team, our insurance team would be able to help you with your calculating your human life value, and they would be even help you to get the term insurance which is equal to your human life value. So like in your term insurance is covered, and you can actually skip ULIP and endowment plans, and you need to make sure that you buy earlier so that your premium is very low. And health insurance minimum of 5 to 10 lakh cover is absolutely essential, even though if your employer is providing you one, even though if you have a corporate cover. Yeah. And because just like I was saying, you just can't completely rely on your corporate cover, because once you finish your job there, it actually ends, and you need to get it before you you know before you get pre-existing conditions. Yeah. So just like how we help our M2W milestones to wealth investors to create that 1 crore corpus, we divide it into smaller milestones. You in your personal finance journey, you need to have a milestone by age actually. So you need to make sure that by 25 your emergency funds, your insurance, your term and health insurance, and your first SIP is running, because at that time you can't do a lot more, but starting is absolutely essential, so that builds your foundation, right? And by 30 you're in the middle, you're the second milestone, and you need to make sure that your emergency fund is at least sorted out, your 3 to 6 months of expenses completely saved. That is absolutely uh, necessary, right? That's the bare minimum that you should have done. And you need to make sure that at least your minimum you're investing 20% of your income. It should be even more higher. And you need to make sure that you would have cleared your personal loans or credit card loans or EMIs, which are high interest debts. And by 35 you need to be in a compounding phase, and you need to make sure that your net worth is 3 times more than your annual income. And you need to organizedly, you need to invest based on your goals. That is, portion of it, your investments should go to a home building goal, a retirement goal, or a kids education goal. And you should be diversified across asset classes like equity, debt, and gold. So I just want to end this webinar by, by saying 5 steps which you should, start this week. So first you can, track last month's spending and calculate your savings rate. And, you can, start a mutual fund account, and, you can start by your first investments by putting into a liquid fund for your emergency fund. And you can start buying term insurance and the health cover, and this term and health cover can even be done before you start the emergency fund of 10,000. And you can start after doing all this, you can start an SIP. Even a small SIP of 2,000 is completely fine if you're very young or if you've just started your career. And you just need to automate your SIP. You can give a debit date of a particular date every month, so that the same amount gets debited on that particular date. It's like an auto debit. So, like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years back. And the second best time is now. So the time is now, and the best time to start investments is now. Thank you all for joining.